to come out here today and do some wildflower photography. I was out here a few days ago doing some hiking and noticed a lot of the flowers were starting to come out. So I wanted to see what I could get. And in particular today, I wanted to bring with me and show you how to use extension tubes. Now, most of the time when I do my macro photography, I will use like a short telephoto macro lens. And it's very convenient to use a macro lens, but you don't always need a macro lens to do macro photography. That's where these are very good, because these are actually a very cheap way to get into quality work. These are basically just spacers. As you can see, they're hollow. There's no glass elements in them. And you put them in between your lens and your camera, because the way this works is your lens elements, the farther away they get from the sensor, it's going to focus it closer, and that's what enables you to get macro shots. So if we put some more space between that, we're able to make it focus really close. Now today I'm using a very simple setup. I'm just using a 40mm pancake lens, that's why it's so thin, on a 7D, and this is a crop frame camera. So this is actually going to give me about the equivalent of, a short telephoto. So it gives me a little bit of working distance. So, let's just hit the trail and see what we can find. I found this cool little grouping of yellow violets here underneath this rock, and it's a pretty good situation. The hardest part about this was trying to get my tripod into position. Fortunately, I have my vlogging tripod with me today, taking the vlogs, and as you can see, I'm able to get it into a little bit better position than my regular tripod. So I was able to switch those out and just kind of jam this up in here and get as close as I can. This is one of those things where a telephoto would probably be a lot better for doing macro shots, because you can basically zoom in and get a little bit, stay back here a little bit more and zoom into it, so I don't have to jam it up really close. That's the problem with using shorter focal length lenses. But like I said, I just want to show that you can do it if you need to. I'm again using the 40mm lens with just a 12mm extension tube behind it, and that allows me to get pretty good close focus on it and everything. Another way I could do it is to back off and take, maybe not even use an extension tube, but just take the shot and then even, zoom in just a little bit. I'm not real close in on this. I'm not even life size on this, but I'm just kind of in enough to get the three blossoms. So it looks pretty good. I think it's going to turn out pretty good. So I was getting ready to take some pictures of this little flower right here, and a couple of things happened. Sun came out, which it wasn't supposed to do today. It was supposed to be cloudy all day. And I generally don't like doing macro photography or any kind of forest floor stuff when there's sun. The dappled light really causes some problems. I like to have a nice even tone over everything. The other thing that's even worse is the wind picked up, so now every little breeze that comes through is causing some problems. So we'll see what happens. I'm just going to wait a little while, and hopefully the sun will go back behind the clouds, and maybe the wind might tame down. We'll see. You never know. So, even under the best of conditions, getting sufficient depth of field and critical focus in a close-up is difficult. Contending with constant wind makes it that much harder because of it changing the focus so randomly. So I decided to move on a little bit. The wind was just not cooperating. The sun is starting to go behind some high clouds that we have, which is good. It gives you a nice even lighting for doing forest floor shots and everything. But the wind, yeah, unfortunately you can't do anything about that. Just have to either wait it out or come back or find another area or something. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I was on a high ridge, so I'm going to be going down a little bit more into a cedar grove. So we'll see. It feels like it's a little bit calmer here, but it seems like it's just kind of picking up, going away, picking up, going away. So kind of like the clouds. So we'll see. It's not a lot of flowers right here where I'm at, but I did come across this mountain maple sprouting out, and this is where I'm getting a little bit frustrated with a shorter lens. I do like to use a telephoto lens more. That lets you pick out and isolate a certain subject against a certain background. I am making it work, but as you can see, I'm kind of jammed up against this. I'm touching the other branches. It's making vibrations and stuff like that. So it's kind of hard to do that with a shorter lens like this. I have been able to get a few shots and everything, so it's working. In fact, actually, what I did is I pulled back a little bit so I'm not touching that, and then I will probably just crop it. But that's where a telephoto works better. Now, you can still use extension tubes on telephotos and zooms and stuff like that, so they will work. It's just that today I did try to limit myself, and I am having some issues with a shorter lens, but I'm making it work. So I found a pretty good situation here with a bunch of trillium that are blooming on this little hillside here. Unfortunately, I'm in an area where there's a lot of wind coming up, and all these trillium are just shaking around like crazy. So what I've decided to do is just go with it. And I've opened up my lens all the way to 2.8. I'm at a shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second. And so everything's going to be kind of shallow and abstract. So I'm hoping that it works. It's not usually the way I shoot, but sometimes you never know, it could give a good effect. So just trying it out. While the direct sunlight eased up on its harshness, unfortunately the persistent wind did not. When shooting very close, even the slightest breeze can cause movement in the subject and cause motion blur. I decided to call it a day and headed back home to see what I got and how many shots were salvageable. Most of the images I took were done with a very shallow depth of field in an effort to blur out the background as much as possible. This is hard to do with a shorter focal length. Normally, I would shoot slightly stopped down to gain a little depth of field in the subject, but the wind forced me to use the widest aperture possible to stop the subject movement. Not the way I normally shoot wildflowers, but sometimes you have to adapt. My favorite shot of the day was the grouping of the yellow violets against a small rock. It's probably the best example of the use of a normal fixed lens coupled with a short extension tube to get a nice perspective. Although the day's shooting had some tricky conditions, I find it rewarding to challenge myself to adapt to these conditions and make the best of it. I hope to meet with you again next time to explore more of our world with a camera.